Till your legs free and your writing grip.
I remember as her saying the Muppet Christmas Carol is overrated, and after that it's kind of a blur, but that's how I got banned from Denny's.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm forgetting something like the review. Alright viewers, let's do this. Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, billed on the official website as the most famous production in Broadway history. During its 2.5-year run, it suffered the stunt-related injuries of 6 different cast members, reviews criticizing the confusing plot, and multiple story rewrites and lineup changes in the creative team, which included the Lion King's Julie Taymor and U2's Bono and The Edge. Ultimately, the show was forced to close, with investors losing $60 million, but not before being mocked by a wide variety of media, up to and including Marvel themselves.
Look out! Here comes the Spider-Man! Gonna rough you up like a Broadway musical!
Honestly, lovely viewers, all signs point to this show not being great, but where would I, the Broadway Neophyte, be in life if I, the Broadway Neophyte, just gave up and listened to other people? Nowhere. So on this day, I go into Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark with a thankful heart and an open mind. But first, some backstory on our hero. Why do directors love to kill this kid's family over and over? I mean, did nothing ever happen to him past high school in the comics? Here to tell us is one of my closest friends, the official Broadway Neophyte comic book history consultant.
Yeah, you said if I do this, you'll stop blasting 80s power ballads at 3 in the morning?
Which I will do. Symbiosis and Action Man, we are building this dream together. Tell them about Spider-Man.
Okay, so Peter Parker is a mild-mannered high school student who's a stand-in for the audience because he gets bullied for being such a nerd. One day, he goes on a field trip for his science class to Oscorp, the totally not evil corporation run by his best friend Harry's totally not evil dad, Norman Osborn, where he's bit by a radioactive spider that gives him special spider powers that we later find out are actually magical. But then we find out they're scientific, and then we find out they're magical, but a time-traveling vampire from an alternate universe got fused with the core of the multiverse and ensures that every Peter Parker in all the universes are bit by the same spider to make sure there's a Spider-Man in each universe. Comics are weird. Some of Peter's supporting cast include Gwen Stacy, his high school sweetheart who dies in a horrible accident that was totally preventable and probably Peter's fault. As well as Mary Jane Watson, the love of his life. He loved her so much that he sold his marriage with her to Satan in order to save his Aunt May from a totally preventable accident that was probably Peter's fault. Other members of his supporting cast include his Aunt May, as well as a crippling feeling of self-guilt over the death of his Uncle Ben, who died in a horrible accident that was totally preventable and probably Peter's fault. Some of Spider-Man's classic villains include the Green Goblin, who is secretly his best friend Harry's totally not evil dad, Norman Osborn, as well as Dr. Octopus, who, on his deathbed, marries Peter's aunt and then swaps bodies with Peter in order to do evil things, but learns the value of friendship and swaps back. Yeah, comics are weird. There have been several adaptations of Spider-Man's origin story over the years, including several video games, TV series, movies, all leading up to this wonderful musical. Another place you might have seen Spider-Man and Broadway meet recently is on the Netflix show Kimmy Schmidt, where Titus Andromedon auditions for the sequel to Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, Spider-Man 2, Too Many Spider-Men, which might seem like a funny joke, but was actually a real plot from the comics in the 90s, where Spider-Man was cloned and the clones fought amongst each other because none of them knew which one the real Spider-Man was. But of course the readers knew it's the one you've been reading about for the past 30 years. And not only are comics weird, but sometimes they're very poorly written. Like musical theater. Can I go now?
Yes, you can. Yeah, okay, you're the meaning of my life. Thank you for helping with this. Get out of my home. I'm the Broadway Neophyte, and this is Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. We begin with our protagonist, Peter Parker, a high school student who is, as per stage and screen tradition, played by a 20-something actor. He gives a report he's reading off a tiny note card about the Greek myth of Arachne, which transitions into a very special effects-heavy Cirque du Soleil type retelling. Arachne was a skilled weaver who boasted that she was more talented than the goddess Athena, and ended up in a weaving contest with her. After losing the contest, she hung herself, but Athena took pity on her and transformed her into the first spider, cursed to wander the universe spinning webs. The teacher explains that the story of Arachne is a cautionary tale.
If you're blessed with powers, talents that rival those of the gods, what would you do? Squander them or use them responsibly?
You know, I can't help but wonder if this Arachne story is any kind of foreshadowing, if it will be relevant at any point in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, the Spider-Man musical about Spider-Man, a man with the powers of a spider. We also find out Peter is an unpopular nerd, which means we're about to witness the sick, brutal burns that only fictional school bullies can deliver.
Yeah, sure is, because you're a dork. A girl with 8 legs might consider going out with you.
In the arms of the angel.
It's geek, and you're the geek. Bully my number. Bully my number.
Okay, does this actually need a song? I mean, we know this guy is going to end up getting superpowers, battling villains, and the one-dimensional school bullies get a whole dance number. Songs in a musical should either further the plot and characters, or be so good that it doesn't matter they don't technically further the plot or characters, and this song unfortunately does neither. The bullies leave Peter to ponder the questions of life.
And why do I need these stupid glasses?
And talk to his popular crush, Mary Jane Watson. To achieve the effect of the characters walking home, they built a treadmill into the stage rather than, oh I don't know, having the actors walk in place like every other show I have ever seen. I'm starting to see why this thing cost $75 million to make. Peter's class tours the labs of eccentric scientist Norman Osborn and his more grounded wife, Emily. And the same kids who previously made fun of Peter for liking science are now on the hype train about new technologies improving the world.
Gamma rays, tidal waves, influenza, there's so many ways the human race can take a hit. What you gonna sink when you can swim if you don't let a little change of skin designer jeans are better fits.
Cause we can be what we wanna be, and we need to be what we gotta be. That's what we ought to be in the DIY world.
Peter gets bitten by an escaped genetically altered spider, allowing them to finally get this plot rolling.
You leave the kid alone, he gets a good night's rest. When he wakes up tomorrow morning, I'm telling you, he's going to be dancing on the ceiling.
There we go, the ironic word choice that every superhero media needs. There's hope for this show yet. Peter gets super strength and the ability to shoot webs, which he uses to defeat school bullies and do some neat wire stunts. He picks the Spider-Man name and costume when he wants to earn money for a motorcycle by winning a wrestling tournament. For some bizarre reason, instead of finding a big strong guy to stage fight Peter, they opted to make the champion wrestler an inflatable puppet incapable of moving his arms, manned by a stagehand who's just kind of holding him from behind. Peter wins the money, but Uncle Ben is shot by a carjacker while he's away. Now, in the original comics, Peter had an earlier opportunity to stop the burglar that ended up killing his uncle, but refused because fighting crime wasn't his job and he'd rather be a TV star. In the Ultimate Universe and the 2002 movie, he didn't stop the burglar because he'd had a bad day and didn't feel like it. And in the 2012 movie, it was because he was arguing with the cashier over buying milk and didn't care enough to protect his deli from a robbery. The common thread, or should I say web, through all of these is that Peter had a clear opportunity to stop a criminal, but put his own laziness or personal grudges ahead of the safety of civilians, and only realized how selfish he was being when his own family member was killed. But this version of Uncle Ben is killed by a completely random criminal Peter never had an opportunity to catch, and his guilt amounts to just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So what, is he supposed to be on crime watch 24/7? His uncle could have died while he was asleep, or in line at the DMV, or having a disagreement with a vending machine, or even if he had already become a crime-fighting hero and was busy on another mission. They could so easily have fixed this with a 2-minute scene of Peter witnessing a robbery on the way to the wrestling match, and deciding not to intervene because he doesn't want to be late for his shot at sweet motorcycle reward money. It's like they're afraid to let this character have the mistakes and guilt that have always been part of his backstory, and the best superheroes are allowed to genuinely make bad choices and have things be their fault sometimes. As Stan Lee himself once said to me, "I'm not Stan Lee, please leave me alone." We can learn so much from that man. Anyway, Spider-Man makes himself a new and improved costume, fights crime, and shows off a lot of wire stunts and flips, yet can never fly away from this slow-motion car crash of a musical. He's also dealing with his new job at the Daily Bugle newspaper, and his new relationship with Mary Jane. The two of them sing an impressively bland love duet, even by bland love duet standards.
Color of your eyes, dish your dish, now close your eyes.
I wanna believe you and I'm gonna try to see me through your eyes. Picture us and we could fall and fall. No one knows me better than you do, Peter Parker.
No one makes me feel the way you do, Mary Jane.
Jennifer Damiano, you were next to normal. You don't deserve this. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn believes Spider-Man gained his powers by stealing his research, and trying to maintain his lead becomes more careless with his human experimentation, resulting in Emily's death and his transformation into the Green Goblin.
Emily, it worked. Emily.
So that's like a pretty dark villain origin story, right? The musical version of this guy is going to be traumatized, bitter, guilt-ridden, probably a horrifying half-mutated monster from the experiments.
Anybody here know a good dermatologist?
Or we could do that. Dear God, it's like an unflattering pop culture reference had a baby with a different unflattering pop culture reference. The transition from the fairly grounded, jealous scientist dead wife backstory to the unbelievably campy Green Goblin is, to say the least, jarring. The Green Goblin genetically engineers 6 other scientists to create a team of villains, who are introduced via technically upbeat but unbelievably unmemorable dance song. Jeez, like listening to a fax machine. I super want one of those shiny lab coats, though. As the villains plan to take over New York, Peter decides to angst about how his double life puts Aunt May and Mary Jane in danger.
No one understands. No one can help me. There's no one. No one.
No one. Have you forgotten I am always with you?
Yeah, Arachne, maybe he has forgotten you, because you, a figure from Greek myth, have just kind of been shoved into Spider-Man's origin story as a random dream mentor. Oh yeah, and if you were wondering what Turn Off the Dark means, this is the song where it shows up.
It's long longing and necessity in the
When you start to get confused because your uncle is dead, don't feel that feeling. Push it down instead. What does Turn Off the Dark mean? Is it like defeat evil, be an optimist? I mean, most likely it just means the creators made up a cool title and had no idea what to do with it. Like everything else in this musical. Arachne's pep talk doesn't last long though, because Mary Jane and Peter break up after his superhero activities cause him to miss the opening night of her play.
Peter, what's going on?
Remember in 5th grade, we were walking to school and it started raining like crazy?
You mean when our science projects got ruined? Yeah, we got soaked.
But you just started laughing like it was all going to be okay.
Them reminiscing about happier times is written and acted in a way that's actually not horrible. But every scene they're in goes downhill when these boring generic songs kick in.
You are all I need, and all I can defend, all I need to hold on
I will always love you.
Sick of his double life, Peter gives his costume to J. Jonah Jameson, his boss at the Daily Bugle, telling him Spider-Man has quit Spider-Manning. However, when the Sinister Six attack, he ultimately realizes he has to be a hero not only for Mary Jane, but for the world.
But no, not here, not now, no way. I'm not ready to give up the fight. If I can use a single breath to cross the sky, then rise the eye of the needle still in your heart tonight.
He retrieves his suit, defeats the Green Goblin, and saves the city, and Mary Jane discovers his secret identity and encourages him to keep fighting crime.
Superhero landing!
Pretty much all the songs in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark are droning and unmemorable, with pretty but vague lyrics more suited to U2's pop work than the situationally specific songs that should carry a musical's plot. For a character so well known for his quick and witty dialogue, all of Peter's songs are kind of generic and angsty, and the other characters don't fare much better. I guess if I had to pick one, it would be Sinisterio, in which the Sinister Six wreak havoc in New York City.
Vegetable storm sets us apart.
Subway sterilized by lurking lizard monster.
Busted open, savage animals run amok.
And the question on everyone's lips, where is Spider-Man tonight?
one instance of the musical putting its special effects to good use, as the screens, news reports, and ominous music come together to create the dark mood of the supervillain attack. Likely as a result of its troubled production, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark comes off as a musical that doesn't know what it wants to be. Like, listen to this dialogue bit from J. Jonah Jameson lampshading how ridiculous the supervillains are.
Just in from Yankee Stadium, there's a swarm of killer bees.
I'm saying it's not a swarm, it's a man. A man who is bees. What do you mean he's bees?
A few lines like this one, as well as the design of the sets and costumes, lean toward a fun, semi-parody superhero universe like The Incredibles or Dr. Horrible, that takes joy in the inherent campiness of super people in spandex fighting crime, but is still capable of serious moments. But then we have other things, like Peter's crime-fighting alias starting as a wrestling costume, that imply a slightly more serious universe that has to justify the silly names and outfit. I mean, look at Arachne explaining the colors on the Spider-Man suit.
For every heartbeat will color your world red, and the sorrow in the night will be the blue you cannot shed.
Does that really need an explanation? Maybe he just likes blue and red, Arachne. And then those god-awful songs drag us right down into 2003 Daredevil territory. What do you mean he's bees? Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark was a massive commercial failure due to a combination of risky stunt work, an underwhelming soundtrack, and trying to go in way too many clashing creative directions at once. I'm the Broadway Neophyte, and if you have to get badly injured for musical theater, please don't do it for this show.
There is a spider, it's deep in my soul. He's lived here for years. He just won't let go. He's laying around. He's got a mean bite. Now he's ready to